After combing through the new prison records, I think I have finally figured out how they incapacitated Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, this is all alleged and my own opinions, but I don't think I'm wrong. From day one, I said that this was my prime suspect right here. That is an unnamed Morning Watch operations lieutenant. I'm not going to rehash all of my evidence. Some of the highlights are she admitted that she changed some of the counts on the sheet, was logged into the prison system 15 minutes before it malfunctioned and assigned a roommate to him when he didn't have one. And even though she claimed that she did not have control of the keys in the restricted areas at the time, I was able to track her movements on the video and showed that she went into restricted areas. And while I was digging through the new prison records that have dropped, I was trying to figure out who she is. And of course, surprise, surprise, it's all redacted. There's not a single reason that any of this stuff should be redacted, let alone like the times. Now here is where they slipped up, y'all. In this internal memo to the staff, they talk about all the things Epstein was diagnosed with. One of those being prediabetes. He also had a list of things that were prescribed for him, but these were all considered self-carry medications, which is why I assume he was allowed to have them in his cell. Then we find out he was also prescribed insulin, which was not kept in his cell, and he had to go to the institutional pharmacy for administration of the medication. However, on the bottle of insulin, the dates for which it was prescribed have a notation indicating dose not indicated. Thus, it does not appear that insulin was routinely medically necessary. If that's prescribed by a doctor, they still give you the dose amount no matter the frequency of which you need the medication. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me, but I went and I double checked because I don't have diabetes. And from what I can tell, they rarely even prescribe insulin to somebody who's only pre-diabetic. And as a true crime girly, I know it's not unheard of for insulin to be used in an unaliving because it absorbs quickly and it's very hard to detect in post-mortem. And it requires an advanced level of toxicology reporting. Now, we the public have never seen the toxicology report. It's never been released, but they said that they revealed no medication or illegal substances in it. But I just showed y'all there was a laundry list of medications that he took, which goes to show that there was no advanced toxicology screening because at least 2 of those medications he was on would have shown up in them, but are not part of a normal toxicology panel. And some people might not have clocked it, but the Bubba email from Jeffrey Epstein's brother, he specifically addresses Epstein mentioning that he was pre-diabetic and asking if anything had changed with that. And Epstein replied with, all good, which to me sounds like somebody who is no longer pre-diabetic. And after doing some research about post-mortem insulin injection sites, I took another little look at the back of Jeffrey's neck, and right there looks to me. And despite Epstein having a fractured hyoid bone, which is indicator number 1 of strangulation, medical examiners stuck to their guns. And you may have heard that the official reporting all said that there was absolutely no signs of struggle. But if you actually read the report from the autopsy, you'll notice some suspicious things in there, like the abrasions around his mouth, which they attribute to the resuscitation attempt. Except now you're not supposed to give mouth-to-mouth with CPR, so how did he get the abrasions? He also had contusions on his wrists, abrasion on his left forearm, a rib fracture, but the autopsy also revealed that he had hepatic steatosis, also known as a fatty liver, which could be a complication of a massive insulin overdose, not because of the insulin itself, but as the glucose that would be given to counteract the overdose. Now, we know nobody was trying to save Jeffrey. No glucose, no fatty liver. Until you remember he's also on methylprednisone, which significantly increases blood glucose levels. It's actually kind of brilliant, not gonna lie. And depending on what kind of insulin it is, it only needs 15 to 30 minutes to kick in, which includes loss of consciousness. Then all you have to do is let the big, scary, buff New York cop go upstairs and do his thing. Please share this video and get the word out there. And for legal reasons, everything is alleged and my own opinions. Buried in 1,000 pages of emails from the Bureau of Prisons, I was able to find an internal memo where they list the medications that Jeffrey Epstein had. Jeffrey Epstein was pre-diabetic, or at least he was at one point. That is something that you can manage and treat with lifestyle change. However, it is not treated with insulin. Someone who is simply pre-diabetic would not be prescribed insulin, let alone if they were on methylprednisone, because that steroid could induce hyperglycemia, causing insulin resistance and increase glucose production. While that regimen is not unheard of being prescribed by a doctor, it is also closely monitored by one, talking 3 to 4 times daily testing. But there is not even a hint or a whisper in any of the thousands of emails, memos, post or pre-death where they discuss Epstein needing medically required monitoring of his glucose. Since making that video yesterday, I've had a lot of pre-diabetic people reach out to me and say that what I was saying is correct. But if you're thinking what I'm implying is is far-fetched here, allow me to introduce you to Reversal of Fortune. I had never even heard of this movie until after I made my video yesterday. But it is a movie based on the true real-life story of Alan Dershowitz defending a man who is accused of murdering his wife by overdosing her on insulin. A hypoglycemic socialite was injected with enough insulin to put her in a 28-year vegetative coma. And despite getting an acquittal for his client, Alan Dershowitz fully believed that the guy did it. And just 3 months before Epstein died, the real-life husband died. There are no coincidences here, especially when one of the other people who consulted on that defense team was Elliot Spitzer, who I did an entire video about being part of Epstein's web and was the AG for New York during the South Palm Beach 2007 investigation, who became governor in 2007 but had to resign immediately in 2008 due to a S-worker scandal. And the guy who played Alan Dershowitz in the movie was Ron Silver, who I also have already connected to Epstein's web, and this video is currently pinned at the top of my page. And for a long time, I had been suspecting that it was Epstein's lawyers that set him up to get arrested by the FBI, because after Epstein and Bannon decided they were going to do their documentary and expose the elite, consistently, Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indyke, I'm sure you've seen that name before, was not on board with what they were doing. Epstein was completely financially backing this movie, but they were being paid through Darren Indyke. Darren is constantly not getting in contact with Bannon's team. Several times, Epstein and Bannon have to be like, hey, Darren, talk to Dan, talk to Leslie, talk to these people. And 2 months before Epstein is arrested, Darren is giving the excuse that his mother is sick. 2 weeks before Epstein is arrested, Darren is suddenly AWOL and his mom is back in the hospital. 4 days later, Bannon says to Epstein, Darren clearly is not on the same page, and I don't think it's going to happen. Now, after Epstein was denied bail and they had an idea of the breadth of evidence against him, that's when the plan was starting to take place. I fully believe that the lawyers were setting the groundwork for the insulin diabetes thing. 4 days after his bail was denied, on 7/22, one of his lawyers, who is redacted for some reason, makes a point of getting accommodations so that Jeffrey could eat meals with his lawyers while he's in their meetings all day, telling the staff that he'd been eating from vending machines and had had no proper meals, while also mentioning that he should be allowed to use the bathroom once every hour, which would be a symptom of high blood sugar. The very next day, Jeffrey is put on unaliving watch because he was attacked. So he was in solitary confinement for almost a week. And the day that he was getting out, suddenly Epstein's lawyers are saying that he's not receiving his cholesterol or back pain medication. Weird that they waited almost a month to mention this. Now, none of the medication Jeffrey was taking was for cholesterol, but the steroid he was taking was used for treating back pain. But if they were asking for more frequent bathroom breaks, then that means he must have been on the medication because it causes high blood sugar. Several things in the autopsy point to an overdose of insulin. And Epstein's toxicology report, which has never been released to the public, literally said that he did not have any medications or illegal drugs in his system, which means they only did a standard toxicology test and not a more extensive one. Because not only would the steroid have shown up on that toxicology report, but the insulin overdose would have too. These people were so confident in their arrogance and being untouchable that they never thought we would put this together. As I suspected, Jeffrey was not even pre-diabetic when he went to jail, and it gets weirder from there. Reminder that this is all alleged and my own opinions, of course. So as you can see from this July 12th assessment, there was no diagnosis of pre-diabetes. And as you can see down here, he was actually prescribed something for constipation, and then that was when he was given the steroid. Most likely because he was complaining about back pain and he had neuralgia and neuritis, which is like an inflammation of the nerve endings. And when Jeffrey was admitted, his glucose levels were within normal range. He had high triglycerides, but as he was doing his intake, he informed the doctor of that he had hypertriglyceridemia for the last 5 years, and his triglycerides had been at the about 800 level and was now down to 431. So it seems pretty clear to me that he had been managing his pre-diabetes into it not being a problem anymore. It wasn't until July 30th that Jeffrey was actually diagnosed as being pre-diabetic. Keeping in mind he had just finished up those steroids on 7/18, which would have raised his blood sugar and affect the results of that test. Now on the 23, 4 days after Jeffrey was denied bail, he was attacked by his cellmate. The cellmate denies this, and all of the reports say that he self-mutilated, but no, I believe Jeffrey. But that got him quarantined from the rest of people. And even though it had been 3 weeks at this point, suddenly his attorneys were pushing to get his CPAP machine delivered again. On July 29th, the lawyers brought the CPAP machine directly to the health service administrative assistant. And then the next day, on July 30th, there's a conversation between the lawyers and some staff member talking about continuing a discussion from the day before. And Epstein was going to be late to his attorney meeting because he was getting a medical assessment. A medical assessment that was referred to by the warden for evaluation. Weird considering the warden was on his annual leave that week, and it's weird that the warden asked for this even though just 2 days prior he had had 2 follow-up examinations with the medical staff, which I thought was excessive considering the reason he was there was because he slept on his side wrong and his arm had gone numb. On this same day, the attorneys are saying that he didn't get his back pain or his cholesterol medicine, and the doctor prescribes another dose pack of the steroids for him. At the same time, while prescribing that insulin on a sliding scale that is never given to him, at least according to the pharmacy records. Now keep with me here, follow me, because this was received on the 10th of July, and it's a hemoglobin test that clearly indicates that he's pre-diabetic. This particular hemoglobin test, from what I understand, is how you diagnose prediabetes. And the glucose test is testing the blood sugar within like the last 8 hours. So if this was the result that was on 7/10, why was it nowhere on any of his sheets? On his intake, they order the hemoglobin test and it doesn't have a due date until 8/5. And these results were to be reviewed by a doctor. But then the very next day, there's an administrative note that's canceling that test, requesting the same test, but from another place. And yes, they did forget to redact the doctor's name in this one, who of course I looked up. And I know it doesn't mean much, but the fact that he did get his medical license in Florida at one point during, those years, it always just makes me sit up and take notice. But even if they got that hemoglobin test by the 25th, like it was on that sheet, then why was the prediabetes still not a part of his assessment by the 26th? Now I feel like all that stuff could almost be written off with like an explanation that sounds good. There is no way they could explain this. When Epstein was admitted to the prison, he had no food restrictions, he had no allergies, and he was cleared for food service. At one point, he did tell his therapist that he requested a kosher meal. So maybe, just maybe, somebody can explain this to me, because on the same day that he was given a pre-diabetic diagnosis, he was also given insulin, he was also given steroids, he was also given a fish allergy meal. Not one for someone who's pre-diabetic, not one for kosher, but one for fish allergies. Which means his meals probably would have been loaded with more sugar and starches and complex carbs. They would have increased his red processed meat intake. And all these factors seem to be pretty fast and loose, yet they only tested his blood glucose level 4 times total. And on the last day, they only tested him after he ate and he had a huge spike. Not to mention there was a whole day where they just didn't even test him. Now to wrap this all up in a big old bow, some of you might recognize this post. It was a post from somebody claiming to be a paramedic who worked on Jeffrey Epstein. It was located on 4chan and put up about 45 minutes after he died. That was specifically passed around within the staff saying there was a potential leak. Now why is this so important? Well, this is what they sent over to the hospital after Epstein was transported there. And everything here matches from the post except for one part. Telemetry advised bicarb and D50 in field. Someone on medical control who via radio or phone told them to give them a concentrated sugar solution because the patient has very low blood sugar, which is just not true. Unless he was given an overdose of insulin. And they were told to give him some sugar solution to cover that up. Because now if it was found in testing, they could blame the EMS for that.